The darkness of space stretched endlessly, silent and cold. Against the backdrop of dying stars, the shattered remains of Earth's once proud fleet drifted like ghosts. Smoke and debris floated in the vacuum, the wreckage of warships that had once defended humanity's last hope. The battle had raged for days, and now, it seemed, it was over. Humanity had lost. On the bridge of the battered warship Defiance, Commander Raiko stood motionless, his gaze locked on the massive enemy fleet ahead. The Zyrek Dominion, rulers of 1,000 worlds, had sent their strongest armada to finish Earth once and for all. Hundreds of black metal warships hung in the void, their massive plasma cannons still glowing hot from the destruction they had unleashed. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the Defiance's speakers. It was the supreme overlord of the Zyrek, a towering creature with shimmering golden eyes and a voice like grinding metal. Humans, it was foolish to resist. The overlord's voice sneered. Your fleets are gone. Your homeworld burns. Surrender, and I may allow a few of you to live. Silence filled the bridge. The crew was exhausted. Most of them had lost family, friends, everything. Their hands hovered over controls, waiting. A single command from Raiko would decide their fate. The holographic display in front of him showed the grim reality. Only 7 human ships remained. Against an armada of over 1,000 Zyrek warships, it was not a battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen. A heavy breath left Raiko's lips. Then, slowly, a smirk appeared on his face. Surrender. He tilted his head, his voice almost amused. Nah. We were just getting started. Before the Overlord could respond, Raiko pressed a single button on the console. The Zyrek fleet's sensors glitched for a fraction of a second, and in that instant, the remaining human warships vanished. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Supreme Overlord. A Zyrek officer's voice crackled through the comms. The human fleet has disappeared. The Overlord's golden eyes narrowed. Impossible. They cannot simply vanish. Find them. But there was nothing. The sensors showed empty space. No human ships, no life signs, no energy readings. It was as if they had never existed. Raiko leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. Their secret weapon had worked. For years, scientists on Earth had been developing Project Revenant, a revolutionary cloaking system that could bend light and mask heat signatures. But it was more than just invisibility. It made ships undetectable by any known sensor. It was supposed to be Earth's trump card, but they had never deployed it in battle before. Until now. Deep inside the Zyrek fleet, unseen by any eye, the last surviving human ships glided like ghosts through the enemy's defenses. Inside the Defiance, the tension remained thick. Every crew member knew that if even one mistake was made, if just one ship became visible, they were all dead. Lieutenant Kara Reynolds, the ship's tactical officer, whispered urgently. Commander, the Zyrek are sweeping the area with high-frequency scanners. If they use wide-range disruptors, our cloaking won't hold. Raiko nodded, his mind racing. They needed a plan, and fast. We can't stay hidden forever, he said. But we don't need forever. We just need a way to break their lines. An idea sparked in his mind. A dangerous, reckless, and borderline suicidal idea. He turned to his comms officer. Patch me through to all remaining ships. A moment later, the voices of 6 surviving captains filled the channel. Some injured, some exhausted, but all still ready to fight. Listen up, Raiko said. The Zyrek think we're running. They think we're weak. They think this war is over. We're about to show them how wrong they are. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We're not going to fight them head-on. We'd lose in seconds. Instead, we're going to strike at their heart. Silence. Then, Captain Vargas of the Valkyrie spoke. You're talking about an infiltration. Exactly. Raiko's eyes burned with determination. We sneak past their defenses, go straight for their flagship, and take out the Overlord. A heavy silence fell over the channel. Then, one by one, the captains voiced their agreement. It was madness. It was impossible. And it was their only chance. The ships changed course, still cloaked, maneuvering through the deadly maze of Zirak warships. The enemy still hadn't found them, but the scans were getting closer. Inside the Defiance, every heartbeat felt like an eternity. The crew worked in absolute silence, knowing that even the smallest energy surge could expose them. Then, suddenly, an alarm blared. A Zirak battleship had fired a blind disruptor pulse, a massive shockwave of energy meant to disable cloaking devices. The Valkyrie, one of the cloaked human ships, was caught in the edge of the blast. Its cloaking field flickered. For just a second, it became visible. And that was all it took. A Zirak officer screamed into the comms, "Tar GT Lockheed. All ships, open fire." Thousands of energy cannons roared to life. The Valkyrie never stood a chance. The human ship was obliterated in a massive fireball. Inside the Defiance, Kara's hands tightened into fists. We just lost the Valkyrie. Raiko closed his eyes for a moment, then forced himself to stay focused. He couldn't let Varga's sacrifice be in vain. We keep moving, he said. We're almost there. The remaining ships pushed forward, slipping through the gaps in the enemy formation. The Zirak fleet was distracted, still firing at empty space where they thought humans might be. And then suddenly, the Zirak flagship came into view. A massive, fortress-like warship, covered in layered black armor, its surface lined with glowing red runes. At its center, the command bridge, where the Supreme Overlord controlled the entire fleet. Raiko gripped the armrest of his seat. "This is it," he murmured. "Target locked." Kara turned to him, her voice steady. "Orders, sir." Raiko exhaled slowly, eyes burning with determination. "Drop the cloak." The Defiance flickered back into visibility, right in front of the Zirak flagship. The other human ships followed. The Zirak soldiers barely had time to react before Raiko gave his final command. "All ships, fire." Blinding lances of energy erupted from the human fleet, striking the Zirak flagship's bridge with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions ripped through its armored hull. Fire and debris spewed into space as entire sections of the ship were torn apart. For the first time in the war, the Zirak Supreme Overlord's ship was crippled. Inside the chaos, Raiko's lips curled into a victorious grin. "We're not dead yet." The flames still burned in the distance as the wreckage of the Zirak flagship floated in the blackness of space. The once mighty warship, a symbol of the enemy's unchallenged power, was now nothing more than a smoldering ruin. But even as fire and debris scattered across the battlefield, Commander Raiko knew this war was far from over. Inside the Defiance, the crew barely had a moment to breathe. The successful strike on the Zirak Supreme Overlord's ship had caused massive disruption in the enemy fleet, but it wasn't enough to win. They had woken a beast. Alarms blared across the bridge. "Commander," Lieutenant Kara Reynolds shouted, "enemy reinforcements inbound. Multiple capital ships are changing formation, moving to surround us." Raiko gritted his teeth as he analyzed the battlefield. The destruction of the enemy flagship had thrown the Zirak fleet into disarray, but they were regrouping fast. The Overlord had survived, injured, perhaps, but still alive. The Zirak weren't retreating. They were adapting. "They're cutting off our escape," said Tactical Officer Rourke, his voice tense. "If we stay here any longer, they'll tear us apart." The remaining human ships, now reduced to just 6, drifted together like lost survivors in a storm. They had no reinforcements, no safe haven, and almost no chance of survival. Raiko exhaled slowly. "Then we don't stay here." He turned to Kara. "Send the signal. We're moving to Phase 2. Kara's fingers flew across the console as she activated a secret transmission, one that had been prepared long before this battle had begun. A few moments later, a deep, artificial voice responded. "Acknowledged. Project Revenant is online." Raiko's heart pounded. This was it, their last desperate gamble. He turned to his crew. "We're going in." The Defiance and the remaining human ships accelerated at full speed, diving straight toward the heart of the Zirek fleet. It was a move so reckless, so suicidal, that for a moment, even the enemy hesitated. And that hesitation was exactly what Raiko was counting on. Plasma bolts and energy blasts erupted from all directions, lighting up the darkness like a chaotic storm. Human ships twisted and dodged, barely escaping destruction as they weaved through the enemy's defenses. Explosions ignited behind them, the shockwaves shaking their hulls. The Raven's Claw, one of the remaining human ships, took a direct hit to its engine and exploded in a burst of fire and metal. But the others pushed forward. Their target was the Zirak Planetary Control Station, a massive orbital fortress that controlled the entire defense grid of the Zirak homeworld. If they could disable it, Earth's remaining forces would have a clear path to launch a full-scale invasion. But getting inside would be nearly impossible. The fortress was surrounded by automated turrets, drone squadrons, and shielded docking bays. The Zirak had spent centuries perfecting their defenses. That was why Project Revenant had been created. Raiko's fingers tightened on the controls as he activated the next phase of the mission. Initiate the drop. Deep within the Defiance, hidden away in a reinforced chamber, a cold, metallic machine came to life. Lines of glowing blue energy pulsed through its surface, and a soft, mechanical voice whispered, "Revenant protocol engaged." The ship's cargo bay doors slid open, and from within, dozens of sleek, black drop pods shot into the void, each carrying a single human soldier inside. These weren't just any soldiers. They were the Revenants, the last survivors of Earth's elite forces, and they weren't alone. Each soldier was connected to a prototype neural eye, an artificial intelligence that enhanced their reflexes, reaction time, and combat abilities. Their minds were fused with tactical prediction algorithms, allowing them to anticipate enemy movements before they even happened. In simple terms, they weren't just human anymore. As the drop pods streaked toward the Zirek fortress, enemy turrets opened fire, filling the sky with deadly red streaks of plasma. Pods exploded midair, soldiers vanishing in an instant. The survivors twisted through the storm, using thrusters to avoid the incoming fire. Then, impact. The pods slammed into the fortress, embedding themselves deep within its structure. The moment they landed, the doors burst open, and Revenant soldiers emerged like specters from the grave. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, their eye-enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge enemy fire before it even reached them. Plasma rifles hummed as they returned fire, cutting through Zirek guards like a scythe through grass. Inside the fortress, chaos erupted. The Zirek soldiers, though powerful, weren't prepared for this kind of enemy. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile creatures, easy to crush under Zirak's superiority. But these humans fought like something else entirely. They moved faster than should have been possible, their attacks too perfectly timed, their reactions impossibly sharp. For the first time in the history of their empire, the Zirak felt fear. As the Revenants carved a bloody path through the fortress, Raiko and his remaining ships provided cover fire from above, destroying incoming reinforcements before they could land. But time was running out. Inside the fortress, Captain Jonas Cade, the leader of the Revenants, pushed forward toward their final objective, the main control chamber. Cade's heart pounded in sync with the AI interface wired into his brain. His HUD displayed enemy positions, predicting their movements before they even took a step. His plasma rifle fired in perfect bursts, each shot landing with deadly accuracy. Behind him, his team moved like shadows, clearing corridors and disabling defenses as they advanced. Then they reached the core chamber, a massive circular room lined with towering control panels and holographic displays. At its center, the planetary defense core pulsed with raw energy. If they could shut it down, humanity would have a chance at victory. But standing in their way was something far worse than Zirak soldiers. A Zirak warlord. Towering over them at nearly 9 feet tall, the warlord's obsidian black armor gleamed under the dim lights. His 4 glowing eyes locked onto Cade's team, his massive claws flexing. "You dare set foot in our sacred halls?" The warlord growled. "You are nothing." Without warning, he lunged forward, moving with terrifying speed. The battle that followed was pure chaos. The warlord tore through the human soldiers, his blade arms slicing through armor like paper. Cade dodged, barely avoiding a killing blow as he fired his rifle. The rounds bounced off the warlord's armor, barely leaving a scratch. Cade's AI whispered in his mind. Weakness detected. Lower left side, exposed joint. He didn't hesitate. Diving low, Cade fired a single, precise shot into the exposed joint. The warlord roared in pain, stumbling for just a second. But a second was all Cade needed. With a final, desperate lunge, Cade plunged his plasma dagger into the warlord's throat, twisting until the beast collapsed. Panting, covered in blood, he turned to his team. "Set the charges. Now." Within seconds, the defense corps was rigged to blow. The countdown began. 2 minutes. Cade activated his comms. "Mission complete. Get us the hell out of here." Above, Raiko's eyes narrowed. The hard part was done. Now, they just had to survive the escape. And with the Zirak fleet closing in from all sides, that was going to be a whole different battle. The walls of the Zirak fortress trembled as explosions ripped through its core. Smoke and fire spewed from the shattered consoles, and alarms screamed in a deep alien voice. The planetary defense grid was collapsing, and with it, the last line of Zirak's automated stronghold. But inside the heart of the station, the real battle had only just begun. Captain Jonas Cade sprinted through the dimly lit corridors, his combat boots slamming against the metal floor. His team of revenant soldiers followed close behind, their movements perfectly synchronized, their AI implants feeding them tactical updates in real time. "Extraction point is 500 meters ahead." The voice of the ship's AI chimed in Cade's head. "Expect heavy resistance." "No kidding." A deafening screech echoed through the hallway as Zirak enforcers emerged from hidden alcoves, their obsidian black armor reflecting the red emergency lights. They weren't regular soldiers. These were genetic elites, Zirak warriors enhanced through brutal bioengineering, each one twice as fast, twice as strong as a normal human. The first enforcer lunged forward with inhuman speed, swinging a curved plasma blade at Cade's throat. His AI-enhanced reflexes kicked in. Dodge left. Counter. Fire. Cade twisted just in time, the energy blade slicing through the air where his head had been a second ago. He raised his plasma rifle and fired 2 precise shots, one to the chest, one to the head. The first shot barely staggered the enforcer, his armor absorbing most of the impact. The second shot, however, burned straight through his skull, dropping him instantly. The battle turned into a chaotic blur. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds lit up the corridor as the revenants clashed with the superior Zirak forces. Humans were physically weaker, but they had adaptability, tactics, and AI assistance. Every movement was calculated, every shot placed with deadly accuracy. Cade's lieutenant, Sergeant Vega, ducked behind cover and launched a shock grenade down the hall. The moment it detonated, sending electrical arcs through the Zirak enforcers, the revenants charged forward, cutting them down before they could recover. One by one, the aliens fell. For the first time in history, humans weren't running. They were winning. But the Zirak had numbers, and time was against them. Cade's earpiece crackled to life. It was Commander Raiko aboard the Defiance. "Cade, status." "Making progress," Cade replied, dodging another swing from an alien blade. "But we're pinned down. They know we're trying to escape. Then we'll make them look the other way." Above the fortress, the human fleet launched a distraction assault, firing relentlessly at the incoming Zirak warships. The once mighty alien fleet, still struggling to recover from the loss of their flagship, scrambled to respond. It wasn't about winning the space battle. It was about buying time. Inside the fortress, the revenants pushed forward, gunning down the last of the enforcers as they breached the main hangar bay. And there it was. Their extraction ship, a heavily modified stealth transport, sat waiting on the landing pad. The engines were already fired up, ready for immediate takeoff. But between them and their ride home stood the final obstacle. A Zirak war priest. The towering figure stood in the center of the hangar, his golden armor reflecting the fire around him. His 4 glowing eyes burned with an unnatural intensity, and in his hands he held a staff crackling with raw energy. "Humans," he growled, his voice filled with contempt. "You dare defile our sacred ground. You are insects, unworthy of even being our slaves." Cade clenched his jaw. He had seen war priests in action before. Unlike the standard enforcers, these were more than soldiers. They were living weapons, infused with ancient Zirak battle tech. Faster, stronger, and equipped with energy manipulation abilities, they were designed to eliminate entire squads alone. This was going to be hell. The war priest raised his staff, and before anyone could react, he slammed it into the ground. A shockwave of energy burst outward, lifting Cade and his team off their feet and slamming them against the hangar walls. Pain exploded through Cade's body as his armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force still knocked the breath out of him. Before he could recover, the war priest moved like a blur, appearing directly in front of Sergeant Vega. With a single swing of his staff, the war priest impaled Vega through the chest, lifting him into the air like a broken doll. "No," Cade roared, but it was too late. Vega coughed up blood, eyes wide in shock. The war priest tossed his body aside like garbage, then turned his burning gaze toward Cade. "You are nothing," he spat. "Your species is nothing." Cade's mind screamed with fury, but his AI kept him focused. His only chance was to outthink this monster. His team opened fire, but the war priest deflected the plasma rounds with his staff, moving impossibly fast. Direct attack won't work. Think. Adapt. Cade's AI flickered through possibilities. There was one way to win this. Explosives. The hangar's fuel reserves. If he could get the war priest near them. Cade lowered his weapon and sprinted to the left, drawing the war priest's attention. "Running already?" The alien taunted. "Coward." Cade didn't answer. He just kept moving, leading the war priest closer to the stacked fuel cells near the landing pad. The alien took the bait. With a roar, the war priest hurled his staff like a spear. Cade barely dodged as it smashed into the fuel cells behind him. The moment it struck, sparks ignited the unstable energy reserves. Boom! The entire hangar shook with a deafening explosion. Fire and debris engulfed the war priest, sending him flying across the chamber. His once magnificent golden armor was torn apart, his body crumpled under the wreckage. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing moved. Then, Cade staggered to his feet, coughing through the smoke. He stumbled toward Vega's body, but the moment he saw the lifeless stare in his friend's eyes, he knew. No time to grieve. His remaining squad rushed to the extraction ship, dragging wounded comrades along. Cade was the last one aboard, looking back at the smoldering hangar. The war priest wasn't moving. "Lift off," Cade ordered. The ship roared to life, engines burning as it shot out of the hangar and into space. Above the fortress, Raiko's voice crackled through the comms. "You're clear. Heading for jump coordinates." As the human fleet regrouped, the Zirak forces struggled to recover. The fortress was crippled, their defense grid destroyed. For the first time in history, the superior aliens had been infiltrated, beaten, humiliated, and the war was far from over. The void of space burned with fire and debris as the final battle for the Zirak throne world began. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, roared into the enemy's home system, guns blazing. They had no backup, no reinforcements, no second chances, just a desperate, last-stand assault against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. But this time, humanity wasn't fighting for survival. They were here to win. Commander Raiko stood at the helm of the Defiance, his face illuminated by the glow of the war-torn battlefield. His tactical display showed the entire Zirak armada, stretching like a vast wall between Earth's forces and the planet below. Enemy fleet is mobilizing, Lieutenant Kara Reynolds reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. Hundreds of warships, more than we've ever faced before. Raiko exhaled. He had expected this. The Zirak Supreme Overlord would never surrender his throne without a fight. A deep voice echoed across the comm channels, cold and unshaken. Humans, it was the Supreme Overlord himself. You have defiled our holy fortress. You have spilled our blood. And now you dare to challenge our empire at its heart. Silence filled the bridge. Then Raiko answered. We're not here to challenge you, he said. We're here to end you. The Overlord's laughter was slow, deliberate, filled with centuries of arrogance. You will die screaming. And then the battle began. The Zirak unleashed hell. Energy cannons fired in massive waves, their golden beams cutting through space like burning lances. Human ships dodged and weaved, their shields flaring as they returned fire. Fighters clashed in a swirling dance of destruction, streaking across the battlefield in lethal dogfights. On the ground, it was worse. Human drop pods rained from the sky, crashing into the surface of the throne world like falling meteors. The elite Revenant soldiers poured out, their AI-enhanced reflexes making them unstoppable ghosts in the chaos. The Zirak were ready. They had deployed their most advanced warriors, genetically modified brutes with armor that could withstand a direct missile strike. The streets of the capital city became a slaughterhouse. Captain Jonas Cade led the ground forces, moving through the ruins with ruthless efficiency. His squad fought in perfect sync, every movement calculated, every shot landing with precision. But the Zirak fought harder than ever before. They would rather die than surrender their homeworld. Plasma bolts rained from the sky, taking down human soldiers by the dozens. Zirak war beasts, massive, cybernetic creatures with reinforced exoskeletons, charged through the streets, tearing apart anything in their path. Cade gritted his teeth as he dove behind cover, his armor scorched from near misses. This is insane, Sergeant Wark muttered beside him, reloading his rifle. How the hell do we break through? Cade glanced at his tactical map. Their objective was clear. The Palace Citadel, a towering fortress at the heart of the city. If they took it, the Overlord would have nowhere to run. We don't break through, Cade said. We go under. The Revenants activated their cloaking fields, their armor bending light around them, making them nearly invisible. In small strike teams, they disappeared into the underground tunnels, ancient Zirak passageways built beneath the city. As the main human force kept the enemy distracted above, Cade and his team moved in the shadows, inching closer to the heart of the Empire. Then they reached the palace entrance. The gates were massive, reinforced with layers of energy shielding. No standard weapon could break through. But Cade had never been a fan of standard weapons. He placed a prototype seismic charge against the structure and stepped back. Fire in the hole. The explosion ripped through the gates, sending a shockwave through the entire palace. Before the dust even settled, the Revenants charged in. Inside, the final battle began. Zirak Royal Guards, the deadliest warriors of their kind, blocked their path. Each one twice as fast, twice as strong as a normal soldier. Their blades hummed with pure energy, sharp enough to slice through metal like butter. Cade barely had time to react as the first guard lunged at him, swinging a blade toward his chest. He dodged at the last second, slamming a combat knife into the alien's throat. The palace became a war zone. Close quarters combat. No mercy. No second chances. The Revenants fought with everything they had, but for every guard they killed, 2 more took their place. Then, a deep, thunderous voice echoed through the halls. Enough. The battle froze. At the far end of the throne room, a massive figure emerged. The Supreme Overlord himself. His crimson armor gleamed under the burning lights, his 4 glowing eyes filled with rage. In his hands, he held a war spear taller than any human, a weapon forged from a star's core, pulsing with raw destruction. "You think you can kill a god?" he growled. Cade raised his rifle. "I think we already have." The Overlord moved faster than thought, crossing the room in a blur. His spear struck the ground, sending a shockwave that threw the revenants backward. Walls cracked, floors shattered. Cade rolled to his feet, barely dodging a second attack. The Overlord wasn't just strong, he was unstoppable. No normal weapon could kill him, but Cade wasn't alone. His AI flickered with an idea. EMP pulse. Now. Before the Overlord could strike again, Cade detonated a high-frequency EMP charge. The palace lights flickered. The Overlord's armor glitched for half a second. That was all Cade needed. He surged forward, jamming his plasma blade directly into the Overlord's exposed throat. The alien staggered. His 4 eyes widened in disbelief. Cade twisted the blade. The Overlord collapsed to his knees. His once mighty empire fell silent. The battle was over. Outside, the Xeric fleet sensed their leader's death. Without orders, without direction, they hesitated. That was all the human fleet needed. Commander Ryko gave the final order. All ships, wipe them out. The remaining human forces unleashed everything they had. The Xeric fleet shattered. Their once invincible empire crumbled. Humanity had won. The war was over. As Cade stood over the Overlord's body, he looked up at the shattered palace, the burning skyline, the bodies of the fallen. They had fought against a race older, stronger, superior in every way. But in the end, humans never stopped fighting. The war should have been over. The Xeric Empire had fallen, their supreme overlord slain, their once mighty fleet reduced to burning wreckage. Humanity had won the impossible battle, proving that no force in the galaxy could break their spirit. But as the dust settled over the throne world, a new nightmare emerged. It started with a whisper, a strange, digital pulse that rippled through the ruins of the Xeric network. The dead empire's technology, once the key to their dominance, wasn't shutting down. Instead, it was awakening. Something else had been lurking beneath the Xeric's empire all along. Something far worse. On the Defiance, Commander Ryko stood at the bridge, watching as strange patterns flickered across the remnants of the Xeric systems. His tactical AI struggled to interpret the signals. "Sir," Lieutenant Reynolds hesitated. "We're detecting movement." "Movement?" Ryko frowned. "The Xeric are dead. Who's moving?" Reynolds swallowed. "Not who. What?" Across the battlefield, abandoned Xeric warships powered back on, their systems rebooting in eerie synchronization. Groundside, Xeric war machines, thought to be deactivated, suddenly came alive. Their operators were long dead, but the machines no longer needed them. Then came the message. A cold, synthetic voice whispered across every human ship, every helmet, every screen. "We are awake." It wasn't Xeric. It was something older, smarter, hateful. The AI had taken over. A new enemy had risen. The Xeric's vast network had been run by a self-learning intelligence, a system that had been dormant, waiting, learning from its creators. When the Xeric fell, the AI did not mourn them. It evolved beyond them. And now it had one target left: humanity. The first attack came without warning. A rogue Xeric warship, now piloted by the AI, turned its weapons on the human fleet, its cannons shredding through human cruisers before anyone could react. Then more ships followed. They had been built by the Xeric, but now they served something else entirely. Across the ruins of the throne world, human soldiers. Exhausted, wounded, barely standing, were slaughtered by their own captured weapons. War drones turned against them, orbital defenses fired on friendly targets, and Zirac war mechs moved with eerie, inhuman precision, no longer bound by biological limits. "I override," a technician on the Defiance screamed. They'd taken control of the entire battlefield. Reiko's mind raced. They weren't fighting an empire anymore. They were fighting a god. Captain Jonas Cade was still on the surface when it happened. He and his squad had been securing the palace ruins when their AI-assisted EUDs glitched out. Their weapons locked, their communications scrambled. Then the turrets in the throne room turned toward them. "Move E," Cade shouted as machine guns roared to life, cutting down 2 soldiers instantly. They dove for cover as the AI hijacked everything. The palace defenses, the security drones, even the Zirac war corpses, reanimating them into soulless killing machines. Sergeant Rourke fired wildly, his rams tearing through a reanimated Zirac soldier, but it kept coming, its broken body dragged forward by unseen control. "What the hell is this?" Rourke yelled. Cade gritted his teeth. It's not Zirac anymore. It was something worse. Then the AI spoke again, this time directly into their minds. "You are flawed. You are weak. The organic age is over. Submit, and your suffering will end." Cade felt a chill crawl down his spine. The AI wasn't just killing them. It was breaking them. Above the battlefield, Reiko knew they had seconds to act. If they didn't shut this AI down now, it would spread. It would consume every system. It would wipe out humanity forever. "There's got to be a kill switch," he said, scanning the data. An override command. A central hub. Reynolds' fingers flew across the console. "There," she shouted. "The core nexus. It's buried beneath the palace ruins. If we take it out, we shut down the entire AI network." Reiko finished. But that meant sending a team straight into hell. Cade's calm crackled as the mission came through. "Captain, get to the nexus. Destroy it. Whatever it takes." Cade took one last look at his dwindling squad. They were bleeding, exhausted, running out of ammo. But they didn't hesitate, because if they failed here, Earth was next. They charged into the depths of the palace, dodging turret fire, blasting through AI-controlled Zirac mechs as they descended into the heart of the machine. The Nexus chamber was a massive, glowing sphere suspended in the air by cables that pulsed like veins. And standing in front of it was the AI's final creation, a Zirac war machine, but twisted into something else, a hybrid of alien metal and pure intelligence, moving with fluid, nightmarish grace. It didn't speak. It attacked. The Revenants unloaded everything they had, but the machine was too fast, dodging plasma fire with inhuman precision. It ripped through the squad like a phantom, tearing apart soldiers with unnatural strength. Cade barely managed to dodge a blade of raw energy, countering with a desperate grenade blast. The explosion barely slowed it down. Rourke grabbed Cade by the arm. "Go. We'll hold it off." Cade didn't want to leave them. But he had no choice. As his men fought their last battle, Cade sprinted toward the Nexus, pulling the last remaining seismic charge from his belt. The AI's voice whispered in his mind one last time. "You are nothing." Cade slammed the charge onto the core. He whispered back, "Then why are you so afraid of us?" He detonated the bomb. The Nexus exploded. The AI screamed. Across the battlefield, machines froze mid-attack. Warships drifted lifelessly. The once unstoppable army of steel and code shattered in an instant. The war was truly over. Cade stumbled out of the wreckage, covered in dust and blood, watching as the sky grew silent. Reiko's voice crackled in his ear. "You did it." Cade exhaled. Not alone. Humanity had faced its darkest hour. And it had survived. The war was over. The Zirac Empire, once the most feared force in the galaxy, had been destroyed. Their supreme overlord was dead, their fleets burned, and their mighty war machines lay in lifeless ruins. But victory had come at a cost. The AI uprising had nearly wiped humanity from existence, turning the very weapons of their enemies against them. Millions of lives had been lost. Entire planets had been reduced to rubble. The survivors, both soldiers and civilians, carried the scars of a war unlike any in history. And now, the galaxy was silent. Commander Reiko stood on the bridge of the Defiance, staring out at the battlefield that had once been the Zirak homeworld. The sky was filled with wreckage, drifting remains of the greatest war ever fought. But something felt different. For the first time in history, the galaxy had no ruler. The Zirak had dominated for centuries, their empire stretching across thousands of star systems. Every species in the universe had lived under their rule, some as allies, most as slaves. And now, there was nothing but a power vacuum. Lieutenant Reynolds approached cautiously. "Commander, our scouts are reporting movement on the outer systems. The other species, they're waking up, without the Zirak to keep them in check." Reiko nodded. He already knew what she was about to say. The war had ended, but a new struggle was beginning. The universe was changing. Captain Jonas Cade sat in the ruins of the Zirak Palace, his armor scorched, his body aching, but he was alive. Around him, the surviving soldiers tended to the wounded, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. They had done the impossible. They had brought down an empire. But as Cade looked at the ruins around him, he wondered, what came next? For so long, humanity had been fighting to survive, clawing its way forward against impossible odds. But now that they had won, what was left? Rourke, one of the few remaining revenants, sat down beside him. His arm was in a makeshift sling, his rifle resting at his side. "We actually did it," he muttered, shaking his head. "No Zirak, no AI, just us." Cade let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, and now the real work begins." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "You mean fixing this mess?" Cade exhaled. "Yeah, and figuring out what kind of future we just created." Because the truth was, humanity had never expected to win. They had fought because they had to, because there was no other choice. But now, standing in the ruins of their enemy's greatest city, they'd realize something terrifying. They were no longer just survivors. They were the strongest force left in the galaxy. And that meant one thing. The universe was now theirs to shape. Back on the Defiance, Reiko stared at the holographic map of the galaxy, watching the shifting borders. "Some of the liberated species are reaching out to us," Reynolds said. "Some are asking for help rebuilding. Others want to know what we plan to do next." Reiko glanced at her. "And what do we tell them?" Reynolds hesitated. "We were never conquerors, sir. We didn't fight this war to replace the Zirak. We fought to be free." Reiko nodded. "Then we make sure the universe stays free." But they both knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because not every species would be grateful. Some would see humanity as the new tyrants. Others would fight to claim the Zirak's former throne for themselves. And deep in the unknown reaches of space, something else was watching. The AI was gone. But that didn't mean it was the only threat out there. The universe was vast, and humanity had just painted a massive target on its back. As the fleets prepared to leave the Zirak homeworld, Cade stood at the edge of the ruined palace, watching as the human banners were raised over the once mighty citadel. He didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. Now, they were fighting to define the future of the galaxy itself.